how have you seen as a parent, and then what you work with in your clients even and your keynote speeches, how you weave that experience that, you don't have to take us back through the involvement of, what happened, but how do you weave that into today and stand firmly on that as a lesson?
Honestly, it starts with vulnerability. And for me, I live in the space of vulnerability. You talked about, core values as a family, and having gone through this experience of being taken away from my children, family is one of my two core values. And so I do a lot of work actually with clients because of the lessons I have learned around this idea of core values. But it has all stemmed from my ability to be truly vulnerable. And as the oldest of three daughters with two Indian immigrant parents, this was not something that came easy to me because we are taught culturally and societally, and this is not just true for Indians, right? Kind of any high pressure culture or high achieving person like that has that mentality of type A, right? We hold ourselves to these very high standards, and sadly, most of us think that's perfection. I was absolutely trying to be that perfect girl to make my parents proud of me. And so I never allowed myself to be vulnerable. I never saw it as a strength. It was always something that to me was weakness. So I never asked for help. I never, sought guidance for anything. I never admitted when I was scared or self-conscious or anything, right? And I challenged eating disorders in my own life personally. My family has mental health issues. My sister passed away 5 years ago from mental health. So over time, what I have learned is that when you allow yourself to, one of my friends described it as, I stood naked and exposed for the entire world to judge me, look at me, and I stood there with confidence, notwithstanding my story. And that lesson for my children has been huge, right? Because they have been able to, because I stood in front of it and taking accountability for it and let people judge me if they wanted to. But actually, the result was that people respected me more because I took ownership. So that lesson for my kids, let's start with them as a parent, has been huge for them to see, right? Because they look at us as their role models. We are their parents, and we are the hero of their eyes. So everything we do, they want to emanate. And yes, mothers and fathers are very different. So they're going to take parts from each of us. What I hope is that my children have learned the power of what I do, which is transparency, authenticity, vulnerability, and speaking your truth, right? Having the voice, which is one of the reasons why when I was going through this experience, their dad and I were very insistent and that we were going to be truthful with them. So we told them the truth. We told them that I had done something wrong. We told them that I was going to go to prison. And the reason I say that is there were many women, there were out of the 400 plus women I was in prison with, 75% of them were lying to their children about it. And that everyone has their own way of parenting. I was always, thank God my parents role modeled this for me when they went through hard times. So I've always known that I wanted to be honest and truthful with my children. And they have learned some hard lessons. When it comes to how I weave that in with my clients, again, I just take it from a place of vulnerability. So I share my story very openly. I talk about the bad decisions that I made. I talk about very specific moments where, God, if I could just go back and change it, my whole trajectory could have changed. Now, spiritually, I believe that I was meant to go through this to learn some very hard lessons, because now I get to impact the world with my message and story in a very personal way and hopefully make things better for others. So they never do what I did and never make those, bad decisions. So whether it's a decision-making process that I've created that I talk through, or rooting in and, digging down into your vulnerability, and how do you do that? So being authentic, and a lot of the consulting work I do with clients is exactly that. How do you get your teams to be vulnerable and trust each other and resolve conflict better to create better cultures and drill down to your core values? So I've sort of taken the journey that I've been on from all walks of my life and weave it through the stories that have happened into some really hard fought lessons in my life.
There's a lot to unpack there, but I'd like to just start with something that might have gone unnoticed. The fact that you're the oldest child of Indian immigrants, and you weren't like a surgeon or an oncologist or a cancer researcher or something, you're already kind of in the doghouse.
Well, I was
Okay.
a lawyer. Okay, I was still a
Right.
lawyer, so
Yeah.
you know,
Right.
lawyer doctor.
But right. But and then you should be partner by like within 18 months or
Right.
something like that. Right. So, but the vulnerability is really access to power. And in our society, it's kind of counterintuitive, or it's the inverse, where vulnerability is framed up often as weakness
Yeah.
or not powerful, which is the opposite of being weak. And in your case, we talk to a lot of guests on our podcast that have been through so many different things. And one of the things is that I've come to realize with working with speakers for 20 years and having my own life experiences is that courage isn't like as a virtue or as a core value. Courage isn't something you just go into the gym and lift some weights on.
Mm.
It's actually acquired after you're vulnerable,
Mm.
after you've stood naked in front of the world,
Mhm.
proudly taken it, call it what you want. It's then acquired, and it's something that then has to be constantly developed because okay, I've gone through that ring of fire with my children, and oof, what a relief. Or I feel power around that now, and I'm expressed, I'm not constrained. But then there's the neighbor, then there's your pharmacist, then there's people at your gym. So it's on and on. But I think that what I'm getting to is it kind of feeds on itself. The through line here is that you're consistently vulnerable, you're consistently telling the truth, and the power as a mother to their children of being that, albeit in the context of doing something wrong and writing it, is just so admirable. And the keynotes you give, the consulting clients you work with are just so fortunate to have that